Second Adhyaya of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, translated by Max Müller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. First Brahmana. There was formerly the proud Gargaya Balaki, a man of great reading. He said to Ajatasattu of Kasi, "Shall I tell you, Brahman?" Ajatasattu said, "We give 1,000 cows for that speech of yours. For verily all people run away, saying, Janaka, the king of Mithila, is our patron." Gargaya said, "The person that is in the sun, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him verily as the Supreme, the head of all beings, the King. Whoso adores him thus becomes supreme, the head of all beings, a king. Gargaya said, "The person that is in the moon and in the mind, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him verily as the great, clad in white raiment, as Soma the king. Whoso adores him thus, Soma is poured out and poured forth for him day by day, and his food does not fail. Gargaya said, "The person that is in the lightning and in the heart, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him verily as the luminous. Whoso adores him thus becomes luminous, and his offspring becomes luminous. Gargaya said, "The person that is in the ether and in the ether of the heart, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him as what is full and quiescent. Whoso adores him thus becomes filled with offspring and cattle, and his offspring does not cease from this world. Gargaya said, "The person that is in the mind and in the breath, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him as Indra, Vaikunta, as the unconquerable army of the Maruts. Whoso adores him thus becomes victorious, unconquerable, conquering his enemies. Gargaya said, "The person that is in the fire and in the heart, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him as powerful. Whoso adores him thus becomes powerful, and his offspring becomes powerful. Gargaya said, "The person that is in the water, in seed and in the heart, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him as likeness. Whoso adores him thus, to him comes what is likely or proper, not what is improper. What is born from him is like unto him. Gargaya said, "The person that is in the mirror, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him verily as the brilliant. Whoso adores him thus, he becomes brilliant. His offspring becomes brilliant, and with whomsoever he comes together, he outshines them. Gargaya said, "The sound that follows a man while he moves, that I adore as Brahman." Ajatasattu said to him, No, do not speak to me on this. I adore him verily as life. Whoso adores him thus, he reaches his full age in this world. Breath does not leave him before the time. Gargaya said, The person that is in space, that I adore as Brahman. Ajatasattu said to him, No, no, do not speak to me on this. I adore him verily as the second who never leaves us. Whoso adores him thus becomes possessed of a second. His party is not cut off from him. Gargaya said, The person that consists of the shadow, that I adore as Brahman. Ajatasattu said to him, No, no, do not speak to me on this. I adore him verily as death. Whoso adores him thus, he reaches his whole age in this world. Death does not approach him before the time. Gargaya said, The person that is in the body, that I adore as Brahman. Ajatasattu said to him, No, no, do not speak to me on this. I adore him verily as embodied. Whoso adores him thus becomes embodied, and his offspring becomes embodied. Then Gargaya became silent. Ajatasattu said to him, Thus far only? Thus far only, he replied. Ajatasattu said, This does not suffice to know it, the true Brahman. Gargaya replied, Then let me come to you as a pupil. Ajatasattu said, Verily, it is unnatural that a Brahmana should come to a Kshatriya, hoping that he should tell him the Brahman. However, I shall make you know him clearly. Thus saying, he took him by the hand and rose. And the two together came to a person who was asleep. He called him by these names: Thou great one, clad in white raiment, Soma king. He did not rise. Then rubbing him with his hand, he woke him. Then he arose. Ajatasattu said, When this man was thus asleep, where was then the person Purusha, the intelligent? And from whence did he thus come back? Gargaya did not know this. Ajatasattu said, When this man was thus asleep, then the intelligent person, Purusha, having through the intelligence of the senses, pranas, absorbed within himself all intelligence, lies in the ether, which is in the heart. When he takes in these different kinds of intelligence, then it is said that the man sleeps, swapti. Then the breath is kept in, speech is kept in, the ear is kept in, the eye is kept in, the mind is kept in. But when he moves about in sleep and dream, then these are his worlds. He is, as it were, a great king. He is, as it were, a great Brahmana. He rises, as it were, and he falls. And as a great king might keep in his own subjects, and move about according to his pleasure within his own domain, thus does that person who is endowed with intelligence keep in the various senses, pranas, and move about according to his pleasure within his own body while dreaming. Next, when he is in profound sleep and knows nothing, there are the 72,000 arteries called hita, which from the heart spread through the body. Through them he moves forth and rests in the surrounding body. And as a young man, or a great king, or a great Brahmana, having reached the summit of happiness, might rest, so does he then rest. As the spider comes out with its thread, or as small sparks come forth from fire, thus do all senses, all worlds, all devas, all beings come forth from that self. The Upanishad, the true name and doctrine of that self is the true of the true. Verily, the senses are the true, and he is the true of the true. Second Brahmana. Verily, he who knows the babe with his place, his chamber, his post, and his rope, he keeps off the 7 relatives who hate him. Verily, by the young is meant the inner life, by his place this body, by his chamber this head, by his post the vital breath, by his rope the food. Then the 7 imperishable ones approach him. There are the red lines in the eye, and by them Rudra clings to him. There is the water in the eye, and by it Parjanya clings to him. There is the pupil, and by it Aditya, sun, clings to him. There is the dark iris, and by it Agni clings to him. There is the white eyeball, and by it Indra clings to him. With the lower eyelash the earth, with the upper eyelash the heaven clings to him. He who knows this, his food does never perish. On this there is this sloka. There is a cup having its mouth below and its bottom above. Manifold glory has been placed into it. On its lip sit the 7 rishis. The tongue as the 8th communicates with Brahman. What is called the cup having its mouth below and its bottom above is this head. For its mouth, the mouth is below, its bottom, the skull, is above. When it is said that manifold glory has been placed into it, the senses verily are manifold glory, and he therefore means the senses. When he says that the 7 rishis sit on its lip, the rishis are verily the active senses, and he means the senses. And when he says that the tongue as the 8th communicates with Brahman, it is because the tongue as the 8th does communicate with Brahman. These two, the 2 ears, are the rishis Gautama and Bharadvaja. The right Gautama, the left Bharadvaja. These 2, the eyes, are the rishis Visvamitra and Kamadagni. The right Visvamitra, the left Gamadagni. These 2, the nostrils, are the rishis Vasishta and Kasyapa. The right Vasishta and the left Kasyapa. The tongue is Atri, for with the tongue food is eaten, and Atri is meant for Atti, eating. He who knows this becomes an eater of everything, and everything becomes his food. Third Brahmana. There are 2 forms of Brahman, the material and the immaterial, the moral and the immoral, the solid and the fluid, Sat, being, and Thya, that is Sat Thya, true. Everything except air and sky is material, is mortal, is solid, is definite. The essence of that which is material, which is mortal, which is solid, which is definite, is the sun that shines, for he is the essence of Sat, the definite. But air and sky are immaterial, or immortal, or fluid, or indefinite. The essence of that which is immaterial, which is immortal, which is fluid, which is indefinite, is the person in the disk of the sun, for he is the essence of Tayad, the indefinite. So far with regard to the Devas. Now with regard to the body. Everything except the breath and the ether within the body is material, is mortal, is solid, is definite. The essence of that which is material, which is mortal, which is solid, which is definite is the I, for it is the essence of Sat, the definite. But breath and the ether within the body are immaterial, or immortal, or fluid, or indefinite. The essence of that which is immaterial, which is immortal, which is fluid, which is indefinite, is the person in the right eye, for he is the essence of the tired, the indefinite. And what is the appearance of that person? Like a saffron-colored raiment, like white wool, like cochineal, like the flame of fire, like the white lotus, like sudden lightning. He who knows this, his glory is like unto sudden lightning. Next follows the teaching of Brahman by No, for there is nothing else higher than this. If one says it is not so, then comes the name, the true of the true, the senses being the true, and he, the Brahman, the true of them. Fourth Brahmana. Now when Yajnavalkya was going to enter upon another state, he said, Maitreyi, verily I am going away from my house into the forest. Forsooth, let me make a settlement between thee and Katyayani, my other wife. Maitreyi said, My lord, if this whole earth, full of wealth, belonged to me, tell me, should I be immortal by it? No, replied Yajnavalkya, like the life of rich people will be thy life, but there is no hope of immortality by wealth. And Maitreyi said, What should I do with that by which I do not become immortal? What my Lord knoweth of immortality, tell that to me. Yajnavalkya replied, Thou who art truly dear to me, thou speakest dear words. Come, sit down, I will explain it to thee, and mark well what I say. And he said, Verily, a husband is not dear that you may love the husband, but that you may love the self, therefore a husband is dear. Verily, a wife is not dear that you may love the wife, but that you may love the self, therefore a wife is dear. Verily, sons are not dear that you may love the sons, but that you may love the self, therefore sons are dear. Verily, wealth is not dear that you may love wealth, but that you may love the self, therefore wealth is dear. Verily, the Brahman class is not dear that you may love the Brahman class, but that you may love the self, therefore the Brahman class is dear. Verily, the Kshatriya class is not dear that you may love the Kshatriya class, but that you may love the self, therefore the Kshatriya class is dear. Verily, the worlds are not dear that you may love the worlds, but that you may love the self, therefore the worlds are dear. Verily, the Devas are not dear that you may love the Devas, but that you may love the self, therefore the Devas are dear. Verily, creatures are not dear that you may love the creatures, but that you may love the self, therefore are creatures dear. Verily, everything is not dear that you may love everything, but that you may love the self, therefore everything is dear. Verily, the self is to be seen, to be heard, to be perceived, to be marked. O Maitreyi, when we see, hear, perceive, and know the self, then all this is known. Whosoever looks for the Brahman class elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the Brahman class. Whosoever looks for the Kshatriya class elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the Kshatriya class. Whosoever looks for the worlds elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the worlds. Whosoever looks for the Devas elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the Devas. Whosoever looks for creatures elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the creatures. Whosoever looks for anything elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by everything. This Brahman class, this Kshatriya class, these worlds, these Devas, these creatures, this everything, all is that self. Now, as the sounds of a drum, when beaten, cannot be seized externally by themselves, but the sound is seized when the drum is seized, or the beater of the drum. And as the sounds of a conch shell, when blown, cannot be seized externally by themselves, but the sound is seized when the shell is seized, or the blower of the shell. And as the sounds of a lute, when played, cannot be seized externally by themselves, but the sound is seized when the lute is seized, or the player of the lute. As clouds of smoke proceed by themselves out of a lighted fire kindled with damp fuel, thus verily, O Maitreyi, has been breathed forth from this great being what we have as Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharvangirasas, Itihasa, legends, Purana, cosmogonies, Vidya, knowledge, the Upanishads, Slokas, verses, Sutras, prose, rules, Anuvakyanas, glosses, Vyakyanas, commentaries. From him alone all these were breathed forth. As all waters find their center in the sea, all touches in the skin, all tastes in the tongue, all smells in the nose, all colors in the eye, all sounds in the ear, all percepts in the mind, all knowledge in the heart, all actions in the hands, all movements in the feet, and all the Vedas in speech. As a lump of salt, when thrown into water, becomes dissolved into water, and could not be taken out again, but whatever we taste, the water, it is salt. Thus verily, O Maitreyi, does this great being, endless, unlimited, consisting of nothing but knowledge, rise from out these elements and vanish again in them. When he has departed, there is no more knowledge. Name, I say, O Maitreyi. Thus spoke Yajnavalkya. Then Maitreyi said, Here thou hast bewildered me, sir, when thou sayest that having departed there is no more knowledge. But Yajnavalkya replied, O Maitreyi, I say nothing that is bewildering. This is enough, O beloved, for wisdom. For when there is as it were duality, then one sees the other, one smells the other, one hears the other, one salutes the other, one perceives the other, one knows the other. But when the self only is all this, how should he smell another? How should he see another? How should he hear another? How should he salute another? How should he perceive another? How should he know another? How should he know him by whom he knows all this? How, O beloved, should he know himself, the knower? Fifth Brahmana. This earth is the honey, Madhu, the effect of all beings, and all beings are the honey, Madhu, the effect of this earth. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this earth and that bright immortal person incorporated in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This water is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this water. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this water, and that bright immortal person existing as seed in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This fire is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this fire. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this fire, and that bright immortal person existing as speech in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This air is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this air. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this air, and that bright immortal person existing as breath in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This sun is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this sun. Likewise, this bright immortal person in the sun, and that bright immortal person existing as the eye in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This space, Disa, the quarters, is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this space. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this space, and that bright immortal person existing as the ear in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This moon is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this moon. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this moon, and that bright immortal person existing as mind in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This lightning is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this lightning. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this lightning, and that bright immortal person existing as light in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This thunder is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this thunder. Likewise, this bright immortal person is this thunder, and that bright immortal person existing as sound and voice in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This ether is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this ether. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this ether, and that bright immortal person existing as heart ether in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This law, Dharma, is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this law. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this law, and that bright immortal person existing as law in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This true Satyam is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this true. Likewise, this bright immortal person in what is true, and what bright immortal person existing as the true in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This mankind is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this mankind. Likewise, this bright immortal person in mankind, and that bright immortal person existing as man in the body, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that self, that immortal, that Brahman, that all. This self is the honey of all beings, and all beings are the honey of this self. Likewise, this bright immortal person in this self, and that bright immortal person, the Self, both are Madhu. He indeed is the same as that Self, that immortal, that Brahman, that All. And verily this Self is the Lord of all beings, the King of all beings, and as all spokes are contained in the axle and in the felly of a wheel, all beings and all those selves of earth, water, etc. are contained in that Self. Verily, Dadyak Atharvana proclaimed this honey, the Madhu Vidya, to the two Aswins. And a Rishi, seeing this, said, O ye two heroes, Aswins, I make manifest that fearful deed of yours, which you performed for the sake of gain, like a thunder makes manifest the rain. The honey, Madhu Vidya, which Dadyak Atharvana proclaimed to you through the head of a horse. Verily, Dadyak Atharvana proclaimed this honey to the two Aswins. And a Rishi, seeing this, said, O Aswins, you fixed a horse's head on Atharvana Dadyak, and he, wishing to be true to his promise, proclaimed to you the honey, both that of Tavastri and that which is to be your secret, O ye strong ones. Verily, Dadyak Atharvana proclaimed this honey to the two Aswins, and a Rishi, seeing this, said, He, the Lord, made bodies with 2 feet, he made bodies with 4 feet. Having first became a bird, he entered the bodies as Purusha, as the person. This very Purusha is in all bodies, the Purushya, that is, he who lives in the body, and is therefore called Purusha. There is nothing that is not covered by him, nothing that is not filled by him. Verily, Dadyak Atharvana proclaimed this honey to the two Aswins, and a Rishi, seeing this, said, He, the Lord, became like unto every form, and this is meant to reveal the true form of him, the Atman. Indra, the Lord, appears multiform through the Mayas, appearances, and the horses, senses, are yoked 110. This Atman is the horses, this Atman is the 10, and the thousands, many and endless. This is the Brahman, without cause and without effect, without anything inside or outside. This Self is Brahman, omnipresent and omniscient. This is the teaching of the Upanishads. Sixth Brahmana. Pautimashya from Gaupavana. Gaupavana from Pautimashya. Pautimashya from Gaupavana. Gaupavana from Kaushika. Kaushika from Kaundinya. Kaundinya from Sandilya. Sandilya from Kaushika and Gautama. Gautama from Agniveshya. Agniveshya from Sandilya and Anabhimlata. Sandilya and Anabhimlata from Anabhimlata. Anabhimlata from Anabhimlata. Anabhimlata from Gautama. Gautama from Saitava and Prachina Yogya. Saitava and Prachina Yogya from Parasarya. Parasarya from Bharadwaja. Bharadwaja from Bharadwaja and Gautama. Gautama from Bharadwaja. Bharadwaja from Parasarya. Parasarya from Vaijavapayana. Vaijavapayana from Kaushikayini. Kaushikayini from Grita Kaushika. Grita Kaushika from Parasarayana. Parasarayana from Parasarya. Parasarya from Gautikaranya. Gautikaranya from Asurayana and Yaksha. Asurayana and Yaksha from Traivani. Traivani from Anupajandhani. Anupajandhani from Asuri. Asuri from Bharadwaja. Bharadwaja from Aitreya. Aitreya from Manti. Manti from Gautama. Gautama from Gautama. Gautama from Vatsya. Vatsya from Sandilya. Sandilya from Kaisorya Kapya. Kaisorya Kapya from Kumara Harita. Kumara Harita from Galva. Galva from Vidarbhi Kaundinya. Vidarbhi Kaundinya from Vatsanapath Bhabrava. Vatsanapath Bhabrava from Pati Saubhra. Pati Saubhra from Ayasa Angirasa. Ayasa Angirasa from Abhuti Twastra. Abhuti Twastra from Visvarupa Twastra. Visvarupa Twastra from Asvinu. Asvinu from Dadhyak Atharvana. Dadhyak Atharvana from Atharvan Daiva. Atharvan Daiva from Mrityu Pradavavamsna. Mrityu Pradavavamsna from Pradavavamsna. Pradavamsna from Ekrasi. Ekrashi from Viprakiti. Viprakiti from Vyashti. Vyashti from Sanaru. Sanaru from Sanatana. Sanatana from Sanaga. Sanaga from Prameshtin. Prameshtin from Brahman. Brahman is Swayambhu, self-existent. Adoration to Brahman. End of second Adhyaya. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat.